this border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
Green keeps it himself, looking for the end zone. Isaiah Green, touchdown! Quarterback keeper for 17, and Marshall back up by 2 touchdowns.
Story toward Jackson, got separation to the 20, to the 10, and he will go. Lucky Jackson from 54 yards out. After a Western Kentucky record 16 catches a week ago, he gives the Hilltoppers the early lead today.
Pressure off the edge. Screen delivers. What a catch for Bias, who brings it in. Armani Levias to the house. Touchdown, Marshall.
And will 46 come on the field? Yes, he will. Corey Munson, the freshman, the true freshman out of Warner Robins, Georgia. As long as 48. This will be from 52 yards. From the far hash mark, John Haggerty, the punter, will hold. Jared Nash will snap it. It's definitely long enough. It is good! Unbelievable. The true freshman, Corey Munson, hammers it home from 52 yards. What a clutch kick there to win the ball game.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. This is our last episode before we actually get to preview some games for the 2020 football season. I can't believe it's actually here. I mean, it was up in the air for so long. Will they play? Won't they play? Let them play. Don't let them play. It's too dangerous. It's not that bad. Whatever you think it is, the season's here, and we're going to play in like 4 days. But to culminate the end of position group breakdowns and breaking down the coaching staffs, the guys are going to give some season predictions for 2020. And, of course, we have no clue how many games are actually going to get played. And we're going to go off the assumption that all of them that are currently on the schedule will be played. So Trace is here now. We're going to run down and we're going to do not necessarily a game-by-game win-loss type thing, but Trace is going to give his overall feel for the season, give what he believes to be an accurate overall record, and then some little tidbits of where Marshall could slip up and where the difficult parts of the schedule are, the ones they have to have, the ones they can afford to drop and ultimately be okay, and all that good stuff. So, Trace, let's get into this, man. 2020 is one of those wild years. Marshall's got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. They've got a fairly favorable schedule now that looked awfully formidable just a few months ago. And it looks like one that they could really have a top heavy in the win column when it's all said and done. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what you think 2020 is going to look like.
Yeah, it could look like a lot of different things. I'm not going into this season, to be honest. I'm not going in thinking, well, this team could be in the New Year's Six this year. I don't believe that. Like, I just don't. They have a freshman quarterback starting. They 5 last year with a more veteran quarterback, and now they have a less veteran quarterback. So, like, it might not be, what every fan wants. Now, I'm not saying they can't win the East Division, because they can. I mean, if you look at the East Division's got a lot of problems, or not problems, but a lot of teams have question marks. And like we documented earlier, or one of the last podcasts we did, is pretty much all the East Division teams, top teams, have quarterback questions, but they don't know who it's going to be. So that plays into Marshall's hands, because when Marshall lost Isaiah Green, people were like, well, that takes Marshall out of the equation. But now a lot of other teams having that same problem. Chris Robeson's gone. Western's got 2 or 3 guys back there. They don't know who they're starting yet, I don't think. So the East is pretty wide open. Western might have the most overall talent, but it's a pretty wide open division. And I think Marshall's got a chance. But it's always going to come down to that one game that Marshall can't afford to lose, but inevitably always loses. We've talked about it ad nauseum. They can't lose that Charlotte game. They can't lose this Middle Tennessee game. They can't lose the one game that keeps them out of the championship. And that's a big deal. And if they do it again, then they're not going to be in the championship game yet again, and that will probably be the last time we'll see Doc on the sideline for Marshall. That's what that's what most feel like. Most are in that boat, in that same thought process. And I mean, unless he gets him to the championship game, I wouldn't bring him back. That's just me. But I think it's time for a swift kick in the pants if something doesn't get done this year.
So I guess from the surface, you can look at this and say, well, even with all the question marks that most of the teams in the East have, it's probably still a 3-team race like it has been for the last several years. And somebody could always jump up and make some noise, but when you look at it, it seems to be the usual suspects again. It's going to come down to Marshall, Western, and Florida Atlantic. It seems like. Now, I've said before, and I still firmly believe that I think Charlotte could be that dark horse Conference USA East contender that catches the right teams on the right week and gets those tiebreaker wins that they need to have in order to ultimately position themselves in the pecking order a little higher, once the dust settles. But, like I said before, FIU can't ever seem to get over the hump. I think they had, the best chances to do that was a couple of years ago. They had stellar defensive linemen. They had Alex Magoo, who was really good, and then they brought in James Morgan, and he was really good, and they just could not get over the hump. Yep. Charlotte is on a rising trajectory, so it's weird to me to think of Charlotte as a dangerous team, but I think they absolutely are. Old Dominion's not even in the equation this year, is well documented. So you look at the others, Western, Marshall, and FAU, they're all boasting good offensive lines, talented running backs, a stable of decent playmakers at the wide receiver position. Western has some that are absolute known entities already, and all three are sporting quarterback questions. So you want to talk about parity in the East? Jiminy Christmas, we got it this year. So it's a wide open race, to be honest with you. And of course, everybody's record is 0-0, so of course it's wide open. Yeah. But I think halfway through the season, we're still going to be fighting for, that one game. Is Marshall going to beat FAU and lose to Western? Is Western going to beat Marshall and lose to FAU? Is FAU going to lose to, whatever? Are we going to have a 3-way tie like we saw last year? So I don't know. But how do you see the season? What do you like? What's your gut feeling say Marshall's overall record is going to be at the end of the regular season? And we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games if East Carolina gets played. If not, we're talking about 9 games. So what's your gut tell you?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I feel like I'm predicting a high school football season because I'm going, 6-4, 5-5. Like you just don't see you don't see that very often.
They could be number 1 seed in the MSAC. You never know. I mean, They got Spring Valley and Huntington and Cabell Midland on the schedule. It's going to be tough, but they can run through the schedule if they have to.
I hope they avoid Martinsburg. I'll just say that much. But no, I mean, I'm kind of torn between a couple records here. I'm trying to break down these games a little closer, and I kind of have a technique or some type of an idea of how I think the season could go based on game to game or based on even a group of games. So the Eastern Kentucky game, I think that's going to be a win. Just to give a little spoiler for my later episode part coming up here. East Carolina, whenever that's played, I feel that game's a toss-up. I feel like that game could go either way, so I'm going to hold back on that one. Appalachian State, I think that's probably a loss. Appalachian State's tough. They're really tough. And, I mean, Marshall they could win. I'm not saying they couldn't, but Appalachian State, probably one of the 3 or 4 best Group of 5 teams in the country.
Easily, yeah.
And, I mean, they're just so good. So I would probably call that one a loss at first glance. Home against Rice, I think that's a win. Even though I do think Rice is improving, I think that's a win. And then the next 3 games, what you said this before we started recording, Western Kentucky, Louisiana Tech, and FAU, that's a tough 3-game gauntlet, and that will make or break Marshall's East Division championship hopes. If they win 2 of those games, or better, of course, then they're probably in the driver's seat to win the East. But if they only win 1 of them or lose all 3 of them, they have no chance to win the East. So yeah. I'm going to say right now, this is just my gut reaction, gut feeling at first. I think they win 1 of those games. That's what I'm going to go with, 1 of those 3. And then I think they beat probably FIU, and then they beat Middle Tennessee and Charlotte. So like I think that they will end up, do the math here, 1, 2, 3. I think they'll end up 6-4 and 4-3 in the conference. Is that what that is? 4-3.
1, 2. Well, it's 2 conference losses.
2.
Because it's 2 conference losses. If you win 1 of 3 against, who else do you think they'll lose to? Because you said they beat Charlotte, they beat Middle Tennessee. You think they beat FIU, and then 1 of 3 of FAU, La Tech, and Western Kentucky, and then a win against Rice. So that's 2 conference losses if they only win 1 of the Gauntlet 3.
Okay, let me think about that again. I have to decide on the East Carolina game because I know that one to me is very, very much in the air, toss up. But on being the optimistic side here, I'll say they beat East Carolina. So that's 2-1 out of conference, and then that is, I guess it'd be 2 losses in conference. So that would be what, 6-4 and 5-2 in the conference. Is that what that would be?
Well, if East Carolina's a win, based on everything else you said, a loss to Appalachian State, and then 2 losses between 3 games, that's only 3 losses out of 10 games. That's 7-3.
Okay, 7-3.
It's 7-3, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-2 in conference.
Okay, we'll go with that. I'm butchering this math terribly. I swear,
right.
I swear I went to college.
Right. And where did you go? Because that's an open-ended joke. I'm waiting for all the Western fans to pounce on that one.
I'm going to remain quiet on that answer. So I'll go 7. My optimistic side, I'll go 7-3, 5-2. But my non-optimistic side, honestly, I'll go it could be 5-5. Honestly, it could be somewhere around there. I mean, I think there's just too much talent that they'll finish under 500. I think they're going to be at least a 500 ball club. Too much talent. I think even with the certain limitations that they have at certain positions and whatever else you want to call it. But I'll just say, being a little more optimistic, I'll say 7-3 and 5-2. And I don't think 5-2 would be enough to win the East. Because it's been the last time a 2-loss team in conference won the Conference USA East Division was 2011. So it's been a long time since. It's every other year it's been 1 loss or fewer to win the East. So I don't think that'll be enough, but that's what I'm thinking right now.
So I don't want to put any early predictions in your mind based on what you said. You said 1 out of 3 is what you think Marshall will win against the gauntlet of 3 games against Western Kentucky, followed by Louisiana Tech, followed by Florida Atlantic. Only 1 of those 3 games is at home. That's the 3rd one against Florida Atlantic. So I know you're not calling for a loss against Western Kentucky, or you're not calling for a loss against Louisiana Tech, but it should be noted, possible. 2 of those 3 toughest games, according to you, are on the road.
Yeah.
In back-to-back weeks. So,
and if they lose the East Carolina game, then that means it'll be 6-4, 5-2.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So that game right there to me is a big difference maker in this season, because out of all those games that are on the schedule, I feel like the East Carolina game might be the biggest toss up looking at it on paper.
Yeah, and to take it a step further, if that game does not get rescheduled and does not get played, Marshall does not get that win, then you're 6-3. So it's not as sexy. I mean, 7-3 is not really sexy at all. No. But +4 in the win column in 10 games is better than +3. So let's talk about where that East Carolina game could ultimately land, because we know it's not going to be in week 2. It was there, and it's not there. It got pushed back, and we know it's not going to be in week 4 because it was there, and it's not there. So there are really only 2 places that game could land without major shakeup to the Marshall schedule, and multiple teams having to move around, which is just highly unlikely. Right. So the most obvious scenario is that the East Carolina game gets scheduled for November 7th, which is Marshall's bye week before 75 week, which falls between Florida International away. You would have Florida International away for Halloween. You would have a bye week, and then you would have Middle Tennessee at home for 75 week. So that's the only place that game could fit, unless Marshall just has the wheels fall off and gets eliminated from Eastern Division contention early And then they could ultimately schedule that game at the end of the season when Conference USA Championship game is going on for December 5th. So, I know that game is very much kind of up in the air. They want to get it played, but, it's just seemed like it's been cursed from the get-go. It's so many changes, and they tried it here and they tried it there. It was week 0, and then it was week 2, and then it was week 4. I mean, it just feels like it's not in the cards this year, and that's crazy. Of all the games this whole season, of all seasons, Marshall, East Carolina for the 50th anniversary of Marshall's 1970 plane crash seems like the one that cannot be played. It just does not want to be played, which is so wild. So 7-3, 5-2. Do you think Marshall wins enough games or somebody else trip up enough to put Marshall into a Conference USA championship matchup?
No, not really.
No.
I don't think 2 losses are going to get it done, because if you think about it, if there's 2 losses in there with Marshall, knowing how they've been, one of those losses will probably be to like Charlotte again. Or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, one of those losses are going to be one of those just inexplicable, just how did you manage to lose that game? And they'll probably they could go out and freaking beat all 3 of those teams that I was talking about, FAU, Western, and Louisiana Tech, and then still find a way to blow it, because that's just how they've done the last few years. I mean, I don't like having that mindset, but like, that's all the evidence we've seen over the last few years. So, yeah.
I mean, I get it. Every time Marshall seems like they're in the driver's seat, they hit a speed bump and they get knocked out of the driver's seat. So, is it unfathomable for Marshall to, go 1, 2, 3, 4, 4-1 in their first 5, and, with the only loss to potentially Appalachian State, and, be 3-0 in conference, and then going into hosting Florida Atlantic at home, which will be definitely a big home game. The players will get up for that, and then get that win, and then go on the road and lose to FIU after you've beaten the other 2 top teams in the East and probably one of the 2 top teams in the West. Yeah, it could happen, because it just happens. It always seems to happen. So, like 2 years ago, Marshall gets the big win in Western Kentucky, turns around and loses to Middle Tennessee State. And we all know what happened last year. We've said it ad nauseum. Marshall's in the driver's seat. They go to Charlotte and lose in a nasty, rainy, cruddy game that they had to have, and they just couldn't have it. So, it is what it is. 7-3, 5-2 in conference is what Trace is calling for. 6-3 if the East Carolina game does not get played. What do you think? You don't think they can land in the Conference USA title game? So are you thinking second in the East, tied for second in the East? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, that'd be the brand, wouldn't it? They've been second place in the East for several years running now. I mean, and it's not that I don't think they can win the East. It's just because obviously they can. It's just show me.
I'm with you.
Show me.
Nobody's knocking you. I'm just wondering where you at with this. When you look up and down that schedule, where are you at with it? And you think when the dust settles, you're looking at a tied for second place in the East, owning a tiebreaker over someone, basically a mirror image of last year's season. Tied for second in the East with a tiebreaker over Western Kentucky, watching Florida Atlantic play for a title. And I don't know if that's necessarily what it'll be. Could be Western playing for a title, but whatever. Okay, fair enough. I mean, bowl game this year. I mean, we don't know how bowl games are going to be, but you got to think 7-3 is going to land Marshall in a bowl game.
Yeah.
So who knows where? Who knows? With all these teams opting out, who knows? All right. Well, good stuff, Trace. Let's see how accurate you are as the weeks go along. Trace Johnson, week 1 is here. The Eastern Kentucky Colonels are coming to Huntington, West Virginia to take on the Marshall Thundering Herd in a week 1 matchup that lands Marshall on ESPN at 1:00 Eastern. Do you have any clue how many eyes are going to be on this Herd football team? I was looking at the schedule earlier. It's the first game broadcast on ESPN on Saturday, so everybody's going to be tuning in. I mean, if there is a college game day show, I'm sure there will be something. How could there not be? And maybe in a studio or Zoom or whatever. But this looks like it's going to be the first game following, what is going to be the college game day equivalent. So, Trace, it's week 1 time. Let's talk about Eastern Kentucky and Marshall. Changed up the format a little bit this year, so I hope you don't get a little you won't get confused, but I tossed in something new as opposed to just the rundown with the stats and everything. And the 200 proof player is back. Score predictions are back, but we've got, other than what your keys to victory, there's one more thing that I've added, and I think you'll like it. It should just generate a little bit more discussion. So, Power Index loves Marshall this week. 95.5% chance to win for the Herd. There was no line that I could find on this game, but wow, when's the last time Marshall was a 95.5% chance to win? I think it's probably been a while, but man, they really like them. Eastern Kentucky, 7-5 last year in 2019, 5-3, good enough for 4th in the Ohio Valley Conference. All-time meeting, Marshall leads the series 11-8-1. A little bit closer than most folks probably would have thought, but it is what it is. How about this for Eastern Kentucky in 2020? The Colonels of Eastern Kentucky have gone AWOL from the Ohio Valley Conference. The conference as a whole opted out of the fall 2020 football season and instead decided to play a spring season. And Eastern Kentucky said, nah, dog, we ain't having that. So they scheduled 8 out-of-conference games for the fall. They only have 3 home games. They play 5 on the road, and they're playing a home-and-home series with, I can't remember who it is. It's like Central Missouri or something. I don't remember. But anyway, they've got some pretty good games on the schedule. They ended up playing West Virginia University. They play Marshall. They're playing, I think, NC State. So there's some, they managed to get some pretty good games. Anyway, 2018 was the last time these two teams locked horns, as you remember vividly. 32-16 was the Herd victory in a turnover-riddled game. Eastern Kentucky had 5 turnovers that game. Marshall had 4. I remember that's really about the last time you lit into Marshall special teams, and then they started turning things around. So, I know all the guys were probably listening to you and were like, man, we can't disappoint Trace anymore. We've got to step our game up, and that's kind of what happened. I've got a piece of trivia for you about that game. I hope you're ready. This was before Brendan Knox had emerged as Marshall's star running back. This is early in 2018. So, would you like to guess who the leading rusher was that week in the meeting in 2018?
I feel like I know this. It was Willie Johnson.
I don't know how he knows that. It is Willie Johnson. 2 attempts for 36 yards.
I was just going to say 36, yeah.
Wow. God, he is like a walking, breathing encyclopedia of knowledge.
Yeah, if only I could use my powers for good.
I thought for sure I had you stumped on that one. I thought for sure you would go Tyler King all day long. He was the second leading rusher that day, by the way, 31 yards on like 8 carries or something. This year in 2020, Eastern Kentucky returns 4 starters on defense, 7 starters on offense, and they do have a first-year head coach, Walt Wells. To my knowledge, has never been a coordinator, has never been a head coach at the collegiate level. He was like director of player personnel at like UK or Tennessee or both of those or something like that. Was an O-line coach for a long time at a couple of different stops. But as far as I could find, he was not a OC, DC, or head coach anywhere. I guess the guy, we're going to talk about the quarterback, main running back, and 1 wide receiver. Stats are just hard to find, especially for these FCS teams right now. So we're going to talk about these guys. Quarterback is Parker McKinney, 6'3", 208-pound sophomore. Passed for 1,371 yards, 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions in just 7 games last year. But he will be the starting quarterback on Saturday. Running back, Alonzo Booth, preseason All-Ohio Valley Conference in 2020, a 6'1", 250-pounder, Trace. Redshirt junior, rushed for 673 yards last year. Guess it, found the end zone 14 times on 673 yards. Yeah. They got a couple of offensive linemen does EKU that are also preseason All-OVC. So might be a halfway decent run game. I imagine that's probably what they're going to try to do. Wide receiver to look out for, Keon Dixon, the 6'3", 185 redshirt senior. The leading receiver returning with 497 yards. But here's the kicker, only 1 receiving touchdown. So I guess they got a little bit of a problem finding the end zone through the air. Does EKU, as evidenced by their quarterback's 7 touchdowns versus 9 interceptions. So there's a little bit of a tidbit there. I think that they've got a couple of returning defenders that had like maybe in the mid 40s in tackles. nothing like super, like 100 tacklers or something like that are returning. And I believe that two of their three leading tacklers are a defensive back and a safety. And I think the linebacker is the second leading tackler returning. So it's, they've got a spattering of talent returning, but for all intents and purposes, it's a pretty new team on defense. All right, Trace, here's where it comes the newness, the new. I mean, it's not really new, really, but I'm putting a title to this little part of the show. I want to know what you expect to see from Marshall in this game. What do you think the Herd's going to do offensively? What do you think they'll try to do defensively to take away what you may perceive as strengths for Eastern Kentucky? So what do you expect to see overall from Marshall?
Well, in a broad view of things, honestly, what I would say was I expect this game to be like basically every other FCS home opener Marshall has. That's how I see it. I see it being a comfortable win, but I see it being quite a few kinks in the armor as well. Because if you remember a couple years ago with that EKU game, I mean, they won 32-16, but for me, that game wasn't as close as the score indicated. The only reason they even remotely put up 16 points is because the special teams for Marshall were so pathetic that game. So, they really should have won by about 40, but, they only won by 16 because the special teams were so bad. And, I don't think that's going to happen again, but, I could see it. Those first games, especially first game at home against these FCS-type teams, Marshall usually always kind of has lulls and slow moments, in certain quarters or what have you. I could see that happening again, especially now with a first-year starting quarterback, freshman. I mean, it's going to be difficult just to get him kind of settled into the game. I would expect to see a lot of short to intermediate passes. I mean, that's not that outside of the norm for any of Marshall's quarterbacks recently, but I would especially see that now because this is his first start. I mean, I don't think they're going to want to go out there and have him air it out with 40-yard bombs every other play. I mean, I don't think that's a high percentage at all. You got to give him some throws that'll build up his confidence, that'll get him to a little bit more rhythm and momentum, and I think those 5 to 10-yard routes that they like to run a lot could play hand in hand to that. Defensively, I mean, Eastern, I think I remember a couple years ago talking about how Eastern Kentucky likes to run the ball a lot. I'm pretty sure that was a couple years ago. So, if Marshall can just load the box up with maybe 8 guys or something, I think they can take away the run with not much problem. And then I don't think Eastern Kentucky is capable of beating them through the air. So I think Marshall could have a lot of success defensively if they can take away the run. So that's kind of where I am with that. But I expect it to be kind of like I said, kind of a comfortable win, but also a win that kind of leaves quite a bit to be desired in certain aspects. So.
Well, let me tell you what I expect to see from Marshall. First off, I expect to see nothing flashy whatsoever. I just think the Herd's going to run out of the tunnel and just try to take care of business, period. They're going to want to put on a little bit of a show. They'll take some risks and some chances here and there just to keep the crowd, however many folks are allowed in the gates, they'll try to keep them engaged and keep the energy level high, seeing as how Marshall will have to play in front of a mostly empty stadium just because of COVID guidelines. So they'll have to do some things to try to keep the crowd engaged and the energy level as high as they possibly can. But I just don't think you're going to see trick plays and a lot of flashy stuff. That's just not been Marshall's MO ever. So why would it be their MO now? I do think that Grant Wells will have the opportunity to let it fly a little bit in spots, especially if Marshall's got a pretty comfortable lead, maybe a 14-point lead or a 17-point lead. Why not let him take a few shots downfield and just see if he can make those throws against what should be perceived as inferior defenders to these Marshall wide receivers? I mean, no disrespect, but, it just kind of is what it is. But mostly I think you're going to see Brendan Knox. I think you're going to see him get a heavy dose of carries. Doc Holliday's just going to try to shorten the game and get out of there with a win and move into a bye week, because why would you give anything away that you don't have to give away play calling wise against Eastern Kentucky when you have Appalachian State in 2 weeks and you get a bye? So do the bare minimum. Herd fans should absolutely not be mad that the play calling is boring if Brendan Knox racks up 200 yards in 3 quarters and calls it a day.
Yeah.
This is the type of game to where you want to see them, just make some big plays, get some chunk yardage, put some points on the board, take a comfortable lead into halftime, maybe keep your starters out there for the first series in the third quarter and get them out. Get Sheldon Evans some game action, get these younger wide receivers some game action, a little bit more, a few more targets to Devin Miller instead of Xavier Gaines and yada, 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 save these offensive linemen. It's a long season ahead. So that's what I expect to see from Marshall. What do you think Marshall specifically has to do to win this game, Trace?
Yeah, 4 points here, starting with the first one. I put they need to have a fast start. I feel like that's crucial. And you even said it, I think you even tweeted at this, like the fact that they're going to be the first game on Saturday, the first real Saturday of college football. They're the first game on ESPN. They need to come out there and have a really big start. Because if you got a national TV audience watching you at that point, and if they see a quarter of 0-0 boring offense, watching paint dry offense, then they're going to turn the game off. But if you keep them engaged and you go out and show them, okay, well, we can start fast. We can put up 14 or 21 in the blink of an eye against this FCS team. If you do that, then you'll keep the audience tuned in for a while, and it'll look better for your team and the outlook of the rest of the season. So I think having a fast start would be very crucial. My next point is establish Brendan Knox. I mean, he's going to be the best player on the field. Like you said, Doc's probably going to feed him a lot in this game. They fed him a lot last year. They overfed him even in some cases, but I expect to see probably, depending on how long he plays. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying the game couldn't be a massive blowout, but I don't think it's going to be a massive blowout. So, he'll probably have to play quite a bit in the fourth quarter just because, the game's, comfortably in hand, but not like a 40-point blowout. So I think he could get easily 25 carries, easily. So establish Knox. He's the best running back in the conference. They have a freshman quarterback starting for the first time. You don't want him to go out and throw it 50 times in his first start. So establish Knox. Next point is they need to force 3+ turnovers. If they can do that, if they can put them behind the 8 ball with turnovers, Marshall's got no problems in this game. If they can go out there and force 3, 4, 5 turnovers, Marshall's sitting pretty in this game. I mean, even if they don't play very well offensively, if they can force 3 to 5 turnovers, they'll win the game handily. So, unless Marshall goes out and has 8 turnovers. But, I mean, I think if they do that, then they're in great shape. So, I think they need to force turnovers to the tune of 3+. And then my last point is Grant Wells needs to play clean football. This is his first start in one of the most unique college football seasons ever. One of the most unique positions Marshall football's been in a long time. Especially given the fact that they're on ESPN now, and they're going to have the eyes of the nation, so to speak, on him. So if he goes out in his first start ever and it kind of stinks it up and throws a bunch of interceptions and fumbles and misses throws, that's not going to be a good start that's not going to have a very good first impression. But if he goes out and puts up, 250 yards and a 2 or 3 touchdowns and no picks, or completes 60% of his balls or so, then I'd be happy with that. I think it'd be a solid day. And I mean, he can't play turnover riddled football. It just has to be a clean game. I mean, even if it's a game manager, quote unquote, game, I'll be happy with that. So if he can play clean football, Marshall should be in really good shape.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with all that stuff. As a matter of fact, I said quite a bit of it. My number 1 point to win for Marshall, of course, we talked about it through the position group breakdowns of how good this offensive line and defensive line can be. It's dominate the line of scrimmage. You dominate the line of scrimmage, and most oftentimes you're going to win the game. And if they can do that specifically on the offensive line, open up holes for Brendan Knox, the man can do the rest. I mean, his talent is well documented. And Eastern Kentucky is looking at 7 new starters on defense. Right out of the gate, they're going to play one of the best offensive lines they're probably going to play all year long. So it's not a good matchup for them. So dominate the line of scrimmage. Number 2, you said it, I'm saying it. Feed Brendan Knox early and feed Brendan Knox often. I think you get him off to a really fast start if he can break off big chunk plays or maybe a big long touchdown run or 2 and put some points on the board so that Marshall can, take a little bit of a breather and not have to play antsy football. They can kind of settle into the game and do their thing because they've got points on the board now. The anxiety of trying to score is gone. Then, that's only going to help things. Number 3, I don't think it's going to be a big blowout win either. I made the joking tweet that Marshall needs to hang 100 points, like, for real. And, if they can, great. They should. If they can, they should. But they shouldn't go deep into the playbook to do that. If the fly pattern's working and the guy can, nobody can cover Brock Thompson or Corey Gamage, then just throw it deep all game long. Who cares? That's not a crazy drawn up play. Or if Brendan Knox is busting out 50-yard runs left and right, let the man run to the end zone. That's just how it is. But I say they should run it up and then sub. Like, get the big comfortable lead and get the guys you're going to need for the long haul of the season out of there. Let these younger guys get reps early. And let them get their feet wet in a game early in the season so that if and when they're called upon later in the season, they're ready to go. Number 4, also, you said it, I'm going to say it. You got to ease Grant Wells in. Give him some high percentage throws, some confidence building throws. Let him gain some momentum to where he feels okay missing a ball or two, and it's not a confidence crusher because he hasn't been acclimated to the game. The last point, I got 5 points. I can't believe I have 5 points for freaking Eastern Kentucky. Fifth point, we haven't talked defense at all. So let's just let Devontae Beckett, Darius Hodge, Kobe Cumberlander, and Cavalcante pin those ears back and get after Parker McKinney. They might have a couple all-OVC preseason linemen on that Eastern Kentucky line, but let's face it. Are they going to face anybody like these high-motor guys right out of the gate? No. These guys are not who you want to come up against right out of the gate, and they've got them in an away game. So let them do their thing. Devontae Beckett, along with D'Angelo Malone, probably the top 2 best defensive players in Conference USA. And if you've got that on your team, you got to cut them loose. Trace, 200 proof player time. Who is your pick for week 1 of this 2020 season?
I'm rolling with Grant Wells, QB1. I'm rolling with him as my 200 proof player here. I don't even necessarily think he's going to have the best statistic game. Like, I don't think it might not even be offensively. I would expect Brendan Knox to probably have the best offensive statistical game. But Wells, I think, for the fact that it's his first start in his college career at home, it's a home opener, ESPN, COVID season, all the weird stuff. I feel like I think he'll have a good game. I feel like he'll put up modest numbers, but like, I'm not saying they're going to be like lackluster. I'm saying they're going to be, like I said earlier, maybe 250 yards, maybe 2 touchdowns or so, maybe 20 out of 32 or 20 out of 33 completion or an attempt, something like that. I could see it being somewhere around there. Even over 30 attempts would be kind of a little unexpected because, like, I feel like they might not want him to throw a whole lot, but, like, if he could get up over 30 attempts, then that's pretty good, especially if he's completing them. So I'm going to go with Grant Wells as my 200 proof player.
Well, that's a pretty good stat line, to be honest with you. 20 of 32, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. How about the biggest stat would be a 0, which is 0 interceptions. Right. And you never know. The kid might rush for a couple of scores if they're down there close. So, you can really tip that stat line in the positive direction. Look, I'm not even playing any games. Brendan Knox is my 200 proof player. How can you go against the guy when you're facing an FCS defense that is bringing in 7 new starters, when your leading tacklers returning are 2 guys in the secondary and 1 linebacker? So give me Brendan Knox all day long. I like him, Trace. Honestly, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I let the cat out of the bag just in general discussion. I like him to go 200 yards this game. And I like it to occur through 3 quarters and him not have to even see the field in the 4th quarter. That is my guy. There's no way to go around it. How about a score prediction this week?
Yeah, I'm going to go Marshall 34, Eastern Kentucky 10. The 34 points, I'm not going to guarantee that it'll all be offensive. I feel like, especially against an FCS team, I feel like they'll get probably 1 touchdown through another side of the ball defensively, maybe a pick 6 or maybe a punt return for a touchdown like Talik Keaton did against VMI last year. Maybe a kickoff return touchdown. I don't know. I feel like they'll get maybe not definitely, but I feel like they will get one touchdown non-offensive. So that means 27 points probably offensively. But I'm going to say 34-10. I feel like the defense will rise to the occasion. I just feel like Eastern's not – that's the thing with them, though, is that, like, I remember saying this a couple years ago. They always seem like they do a pretty good job of rising to the challenge when they're playing against FBS competition. They gave Marshall a somewhat decent game a couple years ago. They've given other teams games, pretty good games, Western Kentucky, UK. They do a pretty good job when they go against FBS teams. So, like, I feel like they're not bad. I think they were like 7-5 last year, if I'm not mistaken. So, like, they're that's a pretty good FCS team. That's not bad, obviously. So, like, they're not a bad team. It's just they shouldn't be on Marshall's level, and Marshall should handle them. So that's just where I am with it. And I think Marshall will win 34-10, hopefully more, but it could be less as well. So I'm just going to try to stick with that.
Well, I'm with you. I'm calling it 35-13, and I also believe not all those points are going to come on the offensive side of the ball. I think there will be at least one special teams and or defensive touchdown. So, it is what it is. Let's try something new also before we close this out. I want you to give me your best unlikely crazy call that probably won't happen, but you're calling that it will happen. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. My unlikely crazy call, since we're the first game on ESPN for the 2020 COVID season, I'm calling Marshall returning the opening kickoff for a touchdown. How's that for excitement? That's exactly what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's my unlikely crazy call for this game. So how about you? What do you got for something weird, wacky, and wild that probably won't happen, but you're calling that it will?
Okay, so you said opening kickoff, so I'm going to take it one step beyond that. I'm going to say Marshall gets the ball to start the game. It might even be a touchback. They get the ball. The first offensive play of the game, I think it's going to be very reminiscent if all the people listening to this remember this play. In the 2011 game against East Carolina, they ran the first offensive play of the game, they ran a trick play for a touchdown. It went from Cato to Dobson, 75 yards or however long it was. I'm going to say a trick play on the first offensive play of the game happens. Grant Wells goes deep. He hits Brock Thompson wide open. He takes it to the house.
Wow. How wild would that be if it was actually a touchback and then did go for 75 yards?
Be nuts.
That's that magic 75 number that always seems to pop up for the Herd.
Save that for November 14th.
Yeah, see? Right. First play touchdown for the Herd whenever they get the ball. You said they're going to get the ball to start the game, even if they don't. Their first offensive play you think is going to be what do we know? The first start for the first quarterback, they're going to give them short throws to play. No, they're going to go Pennington to Moss in the 97 Motor City Bowl, 80 yards to the house, except it's going to be Wells to Thompson, you think. Oh, one more note. I noticed earlier after we did wide receiver breakdowns, Brock Thompson's changed his number this year.
Yeah,
he's not wearing the number 88. He's wearing number 13, I think it was.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, I like it. So it's final thoughts time as we get to talk about actual football. So what do you got this week for final thoughts? Then we'll get the heck on out of here.
Yeah, I probably haven't been this excited for a game in a long time. 2020 has been a complete roller coaster ride. It wasn't that long ago that I didn't think there was a chance in the world that I'd be talking about going to a Marshall game live and in person. I didn't think there was a chance of it happening. I didn't even know if they would have the season at all. It didn't look good at all. But now they're trying with the season. They're going to go on with it. They're letting the fans in the stands. And I think, I don't know what number it'll end up being, but I think that this will probably end up being one of the more kind of higher percentages of fans that teams around the country would allow in, because they're talking about all the season ticket holders. They're talking about students. They're talking about, they even have single game tickets, limited single game tickets on sale. So you could see up to, I don't think it'd be shocking if they had up to maybe 15,000, honestly. If I was to guess, I'd probably say around 10 to 12 in that neighborhood. But if they could socially distance up to 15K, then that would be good. Honestly, some crowds they've had over the last few years haven't been 15K realistically. So it wouldn't be that big of a difference. But I mean, regardless of how many people are there, I'm so excited for this game. I mean, I got my email today about my tickets. The season tickets, they emailed me the link to them, so I have those ready and loaded to scan to get in the game. I'm just so excited. Even though it's just Eastern Kentucky, it's football, it's Marshall football, it's at home, it's a national TV, it's supposed to be great weather, knock on wood. It's exciting. I mean, after the crappy 2020 and how horrible it's been, we need something good to happen. And this is definitely something good to happen. So I'm all here for it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think we were going to have a season either, to be honest with you. The trajectory was really going that way for a long time. And even when they started saying we're going to play, it still felt like at any moment the rug would get jerked right out from under everybody and they'd go, no, we can't do it. And, it looks like it's going to happen. And again, we keep saying we don't know how many games it's going to be because, once they open up stadiums, if we start seeing things like cases exploding or something like that, then we'll obviously lose the ability to have fans. And, and if things keep going on and then they just say, well, we're going to have to shut down the season. We just can't risk it anymore. But for now, football is here. And earlier you made the comment talking about if Marshall doesn't start fast and it's like watching paint dry that people will turn the game off. I don't think they will because people are so starved for football. They will watch my timeline was full constantly, like play by play the other night when Austin Peay and whoever the heck they were playing was playing. It was like people were so starved for live football that they would watch anything, and they were watching. Who was that? Central Arkansas or something like that.
And Austin Peay. Peay's number one.
Austin Peay. God, let's go Peay. They will watch anything. So I don't think even boring football will push people away. But it's so glad to be actually talking about games and opponents and being able to look forward to the season. I mean, we're here. It's going to be September 5th, so we're talking about 5 weeks from now, and we're going to be talking about a Moonshine Throwdown homecoming edition in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And, man, I don't want to fast forward anything, but boy, oh boy, does that not look like it's going to be the game of the year for Conference USA right off the rip, at least in the Eastern Division. So thank God football is here. We all followed the effing guidelines enough to get it here, and now it's here. And Marshall even is being rewarded with fans for doing such a great job of following their effing guidelines. And West Virginia has no fans. So the Mounties are just pouting with no fans, but the Herd will be there thundering on, watching their guys in green. Until next week, let's hope we're talking about a Herd dub when we come back. Let's get the heck out of here. Trace, take us out.
Go Herds, baby. Go Herds.
Go Tops. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. See you next week. Later.